Welcome to Brave Inflections. My name is Claudelle I'm the founder of Brave Inflections, and thank you very much for joining us in this video. I'm going to have a conversation with Cathie Lewis. Cathie, this is our second conversation. This is the second of two. If you haven't yet watched the first video, I encourage you to go and listen to that video. I am pretty sure you're going to pick up quite a few nuggets. Cathie shared a wealth of information with us, and always happy to have a conversation with somebody who's as generous in sharing their insights as Cathie. But Cathie, before I go into our first question, could I ask you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, just about your professional background. You may even want to just give us one or two things about your personal life that you really love doing that people don't know about.
Okay. Well, thank you, Claudelle. Thanks for inviting me. It's lovely to speak to you again. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So I am a lawyer by profession. I've studied law. I practiced as an attorney and conveyancer, lectured in law, been a legal manager in a listed corporate environment, been a group company secretary for too many years, my word, almost sets of minutes. And I'm very excited to say that the 1st of September, I've started my new business, Earth Energy, and it focuses on ESG, sustainable development, climate change, water governance, advisory services, and other ancillary services. So it's a wonderful new space in which I am delving into. Also, I am one of the founding members of COGO, which is a collaborative governance network for water security cooperative. And we are working with entities like UNESCO. We've started with the Be Resilient project, where we are looking at climate-informed risk analysis and figuring out how can we contribute towards climate change adaptation, etc. So that's what I do. My keen passion in life is that I truly want to make just a small contribution towards addressing climate change. And yeah, it sounds a bit corny, but honestly, we have a lot of things to fix, and these wicked problems and grand challenges make me very anxious, and I want to be part of that solution. So it's exciting to be in the research space. I'm also planning to apply for my PhD studies. Oh, let's hope that works out well.
And this after 3 masters, I have to mention that, because I think that's insane. 3 master's degrees.
Yeah, well, some people run, other people cycle. I guess that's what I do.
And you're a professional student.
Yeah, it seems like it. But the last one I did my master's in sustainability leadership at Cambridge, and it was such a blast. I mean, I had so much fun. I don't think you should be enjoying something as much as that. But in any event, that's me. Yeah, and I'm just generally very happy in the space I am. So that's
a real tree hugger then, right?
No, I'm a sustainabologist. You remember last time I introduced myself as a sustainabologist.
I remember.
Indeed.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, Cathie, and it's always a pleasure chatting to you. So let me jump straight into the first question. And I've been thinking about our last conversation and just thinking about King 4. And if one looks at the King report, the King Code, it's come through quite a bit of an evolution over time. And what has been quite evident for me with King 4, which is the latest version now, is that there's a more marked move away from just talking about shareholders and a more stakeholder inclusive approach as a principle. That one can see that there is this, I suppose, an effort to get us to a point where we start to change the way we think. But if one were to compare it to stakeholder capitalism, do you think the code is, King 4 has gone far enough?
Oh, what a good question. So I can give you the short version or I can give you the longer version, but I think I'm going to give you the medium version.
Okay.
First of all, I've been doing governance for a very long part of my careers, and it's something that I gravitate towards. So it's something I've spent a lot of time and nervous energy on. And I am a big proponent of the King Report. You must remember that King 4 was published in 2016, and it followed on King 3, obviously. But in King 3, already the concept of stakeholder capitalism was introduced. So instead of a shareholder approach, there was a strong focus on stakeholder approach, not as mature and evolved as you can imagine. I mean, every year there's more knowledge, there's more insights, and you can definitely pick it up in the King 4 report. So it's not a new concept in King 4. Also, what I like about King 4 is that it also builds on other best practices, as it should. So you've got your 6 capitals of value creation, and that is also contained in your International Integrated Reporting Council's IR framework, as you know. And then you've got your circle. So the 6 capitals form a circle where you've got your natural capital or the ecology as the basis of everything. Then you've got your social that forms the middle tier, and that would be your human capital, your intellectual capital, i.e. your skills, and your cognitive reasoning. And then you also have your social and relationship capital. And then on that, you've got your financial or economic capitals, which would be your finance and then your manufactured or assets. And it's just logic, you know, it forms a whole. So that concept is permeated throughout King 4. So yes, I do say that. However, there's always a but, you know, us lawyers, you know, having said that, limited but not, you know, conclusively, etc. If you think about when the King Report was issued in 2016, by then the Paris Agreement was reached in 2015, because 2015 was a big year. And more importantly, the United Nations released the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, if you want to talk about international best practice, and if you want to think about the most robust, in my view, framework that you have to address systemic, complex, global challenges, then just go to the SDGs. And the SDGs are mentioned in the preamble of the code, but it's never brought forward, which is a big pity. But I'm sure that King 5 will incorporate all of this wonderful new knowledge and insights and bring it a bit more, how can I say, a bit more pragmatic. And King is very pragmatic. I mean, I love the principles with the practices that leads to the outcomes, etc. But saying, what does this mean? Because working with the SDGs and trying to understand how do you make it real in a company setup, because you understand that the SDGs was formulated predominantly for a country perspective. So when you start looking at the SDGs, you've got the 17 SDGs, and then you've got the targets and then the indicators. Many of those don't really fit well in an individual or a corporate or a corporation concept. So I think that could be a wonderful addition and richness to the King Report to then really pull it towards stakeholder capitalism. There's also another great white paper that came out in, when was it? Oh, I get confused with all the lockdown, 2020, or I think it was 2020. So the World Economic Forum did wonderful research with the 4 big accounting firms, and they released the white paper, I think it was in August 2020, which they call Stakeholder Capitalism, and it's the metrics report. And they interpret sustainable development in terms of ESG. ESG being environment, social, and governance. But they are very pragmatic about it as well, because they say companies and entities who want to report and monitor and manage their sustainability aspects, and you want to obviously have it as an incorporated concept. You can't have it as a button onto your strategy. It must be inculcated, and it must be one thing. They said, how do we help these companies do this? And what are the key things that you should be focused on? And how do you nest these things? I mean, you've got core elements, and then you've got sub-elements all within a nested system. And they developed this report. It's one of my favorite reports. I mean, it's up there with the King report, right? I really like it. And what they say is, yes, we have ESG. So you've got your governance principles, social and ecological, environmental, and then they have prosperity. Not profit, prosperity.
Sure.
And if you go back to John Elkington, as I spoke about that last time, I said, you remember the triple bottom line, 1994, and that's now people, planet, and profit, etc. 1995. They take it a step further, and they say, life is not just about that. Life is about the system and understanding how these elements interact with one another. Mm-hmm. And that for me is very interesting. So I am keenly interested in the interconnectedness, the interdependencies, and the relationships. So the relational approach to a business, how it fits into the greater ecosystem or the environment. And this report assists quite a lot. And it draws on many other frameworks. That's what they said. They didn't try to reinvent the wheel. They wanted to synthesize it into a stronger version. And you can see it matches. King report just matches this. It's beautiful when you start doing a superimposing mapping exercise, which I did. So what they say is, you cannot have any one of these quadrants in isolation, and you cannot focus exclusively or obsessively on the one to the detriment of the other. So in my case, as you know, I'm all about climate change. So in my world, when I'm king, I will say environment, be all and end all, and the rest I don't care. I'm just joking. But it should have equal weight and equal respect. So understanding how the one interacts with the other, as an example. How do you take the ecological aspects, of which climate change is obviously the top one, and then you've got water security, biodiversity loss, land use, the list goes on, waste, pollution, etc. How do you incorporate that in your strategy whilst not having an disproportionate focus to the other three? Let's take prosperity, and prosperity is obviously financial wellness. It's important. You must make money if you're a for-profit company. Even if you are a not-for-profit entity, you must still be able to keep the lights on. So it's important.
So,
and money enables you to do great things. Sorry. Yes.
Sorry, Cathie, I'm interrupting you here because I just need to understand because the way you talked about prosperity now and in relation to wealth, is it different to profit?
It's a bigger concept. In my interpretation, again, I mean, many people might disagree with me, but in my world, prosperity is the big concept. It's like the mothership, of which profit is one element.
Okay.
So profit is your financial profitability. Have you got more income than expenses? And what is your profit? Prosperity measures, if I had to use a synonym, I would say it would measure the wellness, the financial wellness of the company, but also of its key stakeholders. And again, hence you can see the stakeholder capitalism coming in. So what is the prosperity of your employees? And how do you measure it? Do you only measure it in financial terms? Financial terms you must. And it's important to have a proper salary, and it's important to have equal pay for equal work, and pay equality between the genders, and pay equality between different divisions within a bigger company, equality just generally. But is that all? So in the olden days, the focus was predominantly on financial wellness and financial matrices. And when you did your risk, enterprise risk management, it was predominantly financial, operational, etc. Now we are saying, well, let's challenge ourselves and let's have more perspectives and broaden the scope and ask yourself, is there more to life? And my answer is yes, there's way more to life. Look at what COVID has happened. How many people are saying, you know what, I really like working from home. That is prosperity for me. Prosperity in the fact that I do not have to get into my car, drive through traffic, sit in an office, not see my family that often, and I have limited control over how I want to plan my day. That's prosperity, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So profit is just a concept of prosperity. Yeah. So that is what I like about the way that things are moving towards a stakeholder capitalist approach. There are so many thought leaders and impressive people who are saying, we think the current capitalist system can be improved. And I'm like, yes, I believe in capitalism, but the way in which it is implemented causes great harm and sadness. I mean, where do you think does climate change come from? It's because people do not deal with their waste. And if you had a holistic approach, and if you realized you need to take responsibility for your externalities, that's what it is. That's what carbon tax is.
Yeah.
Incorporating your externalities. That's all it is. Because now it's a huge incentive to say, you have impacts. Improve your positive impacts and reduce your negative impacts, and we will tax you accordingly. So it could be a positive tax in my view. So yeah, I think that's how things are developing.
So you've brought up the concept of stakeholder capitalism. And I'm just thinking about where the world is now. And I mean, you've also talked about capitalism and the consequences of how we have, I suppose, implemented or lived capitalism. And we're now sitting with adverse consequences as a result. But stakeholder capitalism as a concept, if one looks at society where it is now, is it even desirable? Is it viable? Is it, because one would almost, at least this is what it looks like to me, is it's a restructuring of how we have structured ourselves, if one were to move into that direction.
Yes, I am a great proponent of stakeholder capitalism. I think if it is implemented properly and respectfully, it can really make the world a better place. Let's take the recent riots in Durban and Gauteng. Now, I do not think that violence is the way to go. Not at all. I think that was totally unnecessary. If you ask yourself, where does it come from? And if you ask the uncomfortable questions, and if you delve deep, where you really cringe, where I've got the answer and I just don't feel comfortable giving that answer. What do you think is the root cause, or one of the root causes? Because life is always complex. There's never just one reason for things. But what are the main challenges that South Africa are facing? We've got huge inequality. We've got social incohesion. We've got unemployment. We've got water scarcity. We've got low levels of children going to school, and the vicious circle perpetuates. So my question, and it's rhetorical, or maybe not, is if people had a decent job, if people had a decent place to stay, if people were employed, would they act the way they acted? Of course, you will have criminal elements. All countries have that, but let's take that aside. I choose to believe in the goodness of people. And many people say I'm naive. I take it. That's fine. Happy with that.
You on that one.
Yes, I choose to believe in the goodness of people, and I choose to believe that you need to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I'm convinced that under certain circumstances or under different circumstances, people will act differently. I cannot believe that people wake up and think, how can I mess up stuff? I don't think that's how we are. But when you are in a situation, you have no hope. You don't know where you're going to get a meal. You don't know how to feed your family. You don't know how to improve yourself. It must be such a horrible feeling, and it must be such a terrible situation to be in. Again, I don't condone it, but I can empathize and I can try to understand. I've never been in that situation, but I can understand where that comes from. Yeah. Now, if we were in a position to say, okay, let's do something about it. How can we increase the rate of decent pay and decent work, of employability, of the level of literacy, just the pollution and the degradation? Surely that is the thing. Those are the things that you need to focus on. And if you take those KPIs and you make it central, part of the quadrants, right? Prosperity, good governance, social, and ecological. And you put those elements in a business or an entity or a corporation's key strategy. For example, you say, okay, balance scorecard. Mr. CEO, Mr. CFO, all of you good people, and then the people within the company, I will measure you not only on your profit, but I will measure you on the way in which you increased employment. It is a KPI, and I will incentivize you to increase jobs. I will incentivize you if you can tangibly improve the working environment so that you've got more present employees. I will incentivize you if you can uplift the community in a tangible way. And I mean, there are many methodologies. It's not difficult to do these things.
But it
Can
does.
you see the mind shift?
Sorry, Cathie, I'm interrupting you again. But it does, however, take a resolve from the shareholders, though, isn't it? Because what you are doing then is channeling some of the money that would ordinarily, and the old way of doing things, would have flowed to them. So who is the ones who would say to Ms. or Mr. CEO that are you going to do your PhD, or Dr. CEO, that we are putting this in your performance agreement? So you would be measured, because of course
ultimately
what gets measured gets done. But yes, who does that? Make sure
it should be a collective. I'm going to share this with you. So now this week, Monday to Wednesday, there was a Reuters Impact Conference. It was brilliant. And there were very impressive speakers. So, for example, I listened to the president of Iceland, the president of Finland, the president of Vale, president and CEO, the CEO of Patagonia, my all-time favorite company, the executive director of United Nations Environment Program, UNEP. So it's like really thought leaders and serious people. So the CEO of Vale, I really enjoyed his exclusive interview. Now, remember, Vale is a Brazilian company and they are big in the mining. So they have huge environmental impact, and they are an employer, and the social impact is also huge. So they're not an insignificant company. And he said, let's be clear, climate change, because the Impact Conference was all about climate change in anticipation of COP26 happening shortly in Glasgow. So he said, let's be clear, climate change is the biggest risk we are facing, whether you like it or not. We understand that if we do not deal with it collectively, there will be nothing left. They have made commitments and targets to reduce their scope 1 and 2 by 33% by 2030. That's a significant commitment to make. And they said that they'll be working with their supply chain to address their scope 3. what that means is that this person understands the financial imperative. So even though you might say, oh, yes, more hugging the trees and spending a lot of money on, mitigation, etc., he understands that his company will not exist if he does not do it. That was the one thing. And secondly, which really impressed me was, and I don't think it was greenwashing. Look, I mean, it's not as if we're friends or anything, but I take it for what my perception was of the person. And he said, we only exist because the communities allow us to exist. I'm paraphrasing. And if we do not understand our role in the greater community, we will not exist. And this is not what I'm saying. This is what big hitting people are saying. So the tide is turning. For sure, when I finished the conference and I tried to attend as many sessions as I could, my distinct sense was, it's as if someone has switched the light bulb. And if you listen to the panel discussion, there was aluminium company, mining companies, again, very high impact companies. And they admitted that as recent as 2 or 3 years ago, they were like, okay, whatever, I've got work to do, tons, we need to push tons. And the realization is coming that this is not good enough. We need to step up our game. There's more to life than just this. So for me, that was quite an interesting conference to attend.
I'm listening to you, and just linking back on what you said earlier on around prosperity. And you mentioned what the CEO of Vale said in terms of the exist because the communities allow you to. Whether there isn't another P missing there, and that's purpose. Should an organization not have a purpose within the context of the ecosystem that goes beyond just being relevant or making money, but even goes beyond just trying to balance this? So you're in the business to make money, but you've got to make sure that you look at the other factors, the ESG and prosperity and so forth. But shouldn't it start with, what is my license for existence, my purpose? And when I say my, the organization.
Well, don't you think it's obvious? I mean, think about it. An individual, a company, an enterprise, a church congregation, a soccer club, doesn't matter what. Why do you exist? How do you live your life not knowing what your purpose is? Do you go through life just cruising and not thinking about this deeply and not wondering, there must be a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing? Why am I spending so much time and energy on this? What is it that I want to achieve? Simon Sinek is also one of my favies. I enjoy listening to him and reading him. And the famous, the golden circle, and it all starts with why. And I am constantly asking why. Why am I doing this? Why is it important? What is it that I want to achieve? And equally important for an individual, more so it should be for a collective, like a company. Because, I mean, it's just me and my alter ego, right? And we can have lovely conversations, and that's normally cool. But when you've got a lot of people, it's something else to draw everybody together and to get to that sweet spot. And for me, the thing that pulls everybody together is the purpose. Yeah. Why do you do this? And for me, the distinguishing factor is you can generally categorize people and companies into 2 main categories. Those who are inwardly focused and those who are externally focused. It's like people who know and people who don't know. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's not a very difficult thing. And if you are inwardly focused and you are inherently selfish because it's all about me, that's not very exciting.
Yeah.
If you are externally focused and you are like, there's something bigger than me, there's something beyond me, there's something that I want to contribute to, and I understand how inherently insignificant I am in the greater scheme of things, that for me is a more interesting proposition. And I choose to engage with people like that without sounding condescending.
No, I'm with you. No, I'm with you. I think,
condescending.
and purpose is one of those things that I preach all the time, and it's so important. Yet I do see so many people who have no clue what their purpose is, and it's just exist. And you see the same thing in organizations as well. Exist for the making of money. It's as opposed to this is my license for being. This is what gives me the right to operate within the broader society. But I want to move the conversation to a concept that I mean, I don't know how new it is, but the phenomenon around net positive, this concept of net positive. Maybe you can talk to us about what that means and where you think it's going.
Okay. So when I was doing research for my one paper with my master's study, I was looking at this whole concept of shareholder capitalism, the shareholder approach, and then the evolution and the development towards stakeholder capitalism. And, it started in the 70s with Milton Friedman, and he said the purpose of a company is to make profit. He does have a few riders where he says keeping within the rules of the game, etc. But then there were some key moments during this time where, for example, Porrett's five also capitals of value creation. He only had 5, and then King has got 6, etc. And you've got the triple bottom line, etc. So it has progressively developed. And I must now remember my dates. I think it was 2011, round about there, when Michael Porter and Kramer published a seminal paper in the Harvard Business Review. I mean, where else would you publish it? And they were talking about shared value creation. And what they basically said is, we believe that the purpose of a company is to create value in a dual way. Create value for yourself, but then also simultaneously create value for society. Hence the shared value creation. Still focused on profit, but moving towards the concept of prosperity. And that was in 2011, so that's already 10 years ago. Then in about 2015, 2016, again, that golden year of 2015, when many great things happened, there was a group of companies and thought leaders. And, when you look at these coalitions and associations, you have the stock standard companies, and they formed what they call the Net Positive Group. So it's a self-organizing association. And what they say is, we have a new interpretation of what capitalism is all about and what value creation is all about. We say that a company, a corporation, an entity should give back more than it takes, be net positive. And interestingly enough, during this conference that I was talking about, there were a few speakers who spoke about net positive. And I was like, oh, interesting. This is cool.
Catching
on, for sure. So how they describe it is, traditionally, when you have an impact, you talk about your footprint, your water footprint, plastic footprint, carbon footprint, etc. And they kept to that analogy, and they said all your impacts in a negative sense would be your footprints. And then all the positives would be your handprint. And you should have more handprints than footprints. And again, it's a holistic, systemic approach of the whole system. It's not just about financial, because if you think about it, when a company is profitable, and I'm not saying that's bad, don't get me wrong, I like money. It's just, what do you do with your money that interests me more than the actual amount of money.
Yeah.
So if you make more money than you incur, well, then it's a positive, then it's a handprint. If you have more happy, the number of employees, but also the level, the quality, of employees in the workplace, well, then it's a handprint. If you are able to have a positive ecological footprint, which is not that easy, but there are some companies who are negative carbon and they put back more water than they extract, like Coca-Cola, then it's a positive handprint. And the idea is that you understand where you fit in society as a greater concept, because no man is an island and life in a vacuum sucks. I mean, it doesn't work. So you understand where you fit from a helicopter point of view, and all your links and relationships and interconnections, you focus on giving back more than you take. So it's a very elegant concept, I think.
No, it is. So you want to, and let me just make sure that I understand everything correctly. So footprint would be the negative, and the handprint is the positive, and you would want to have more handprints than footprints. Would you then say that there would be an inevitable, there will be some footprints, or do we have to get to a point where we say it should all be handprints?
I think you need to be pragmatic, and we live on Earth and we are fallible people and we make mistakes, and I include myself, and it is what it is. I mean, as we are speaking, we are breathing and it's not oxygen going out. So, and you need to eat and you need to wear clothes. And so there will always be impacts. But there are ways in which you can convert your impacts from a linear process to a circular process. And that goes back to your business processes, and it goes back to shareholder capitalism versus stakeholder capitalism. So the whole circular economy movement is maybe a wonderful topic for another day. But for me, that is the concept. So if you think about nature and natural ecosystems, there's no waste. Have you thought about it? There's just no waste. It's just unbelievable. Everything is made so perfectly. The output of something is the input to another system, and it just works.
Yeah, that's
right.
Mm-hmm.
And our economy is based on a linear system. It's like take raw materials or inputs, use it in a process, and you've got an output, and you don't worry about the output. It's not your problem. If your washing machine is broken, don't go back to Samsung or LG or whoever, because I've now sold the washing machine to you, so don't come and bother me. And that's a linear system. But you can think for yourself, on a finite planet, it will only bring you so far.
Yeah.
So now the concept is, it's not cradle to grave anymore. It's cradle to cradle. So now the concept is, I have to start designing my products with keeping in mind that this thing might end its useful life, and I need to take it back, and I have to incorporate it into the system again. So in very progressive countries like the Scandinavian countries, IKEA is also one of my favorite companies. They are now designing their products already with the idea of, once it's finished its useful life, how can I use it as an input product to make something else? That's their task. They're new designers. That's what they have to do. And that, I think, is how you can convert footprints into handprints.
And that, of course, just to tie back to what we were talking earlier in terms of measurement, would have to be part of performance agreements if you are going to get to the executive to really do what you're expecting them to do.
So I have a different view on life. I'm not a big proponent of the traditional system. Maybe that's why I'm not in corporate anymore, where you've got a performance contract and you've got a function and you swim in your lane. I'm just like, self-organize, be accountable, be responsible, be a proper person. And I know, again, I'm going to get many eye rolls. I get that. And people saying, yeah, but most people are not like that. We can't trust them. Again, I choose to say, no, people don't wake up in the morning and say, how can I not do what I'm supposed to do? if you create an environment where people say, we have a shared goal, we have a shared vision, we know what we want to achieve, and it's external, it's bigger than ourselves. And you have the freedom to say, let's organize ourselves and focus on the problem, irrespective of what your function or your division is. I'm saying, let's rather focus on the challenge that we are facing and pull in the different disciplines and the different functions. Because again, life needs a multiple approach. You need a transdisciplinary approach to solving a problem. So you need someone who's skilled in HR, IT, risk, company secretarial, the whole thing, because now all of a sudden you've got different perspectives and different expertise, and you see things in a different way, and you've got true diversity. And the more crazy the idea, listen to it and think, can it work? Can it not work? And you find the solution. So I am not really a strong proponent of forcing people to do something. In my ideal world, it would be an but of course situation where people are internally motivated to say, but of course I want to do this. You don't need to tell me what to do. I mean, nobody tells me to sit in front of my computer and do what I do. It's just obvious.
Yeah.
So if you can get people to that stage, and I think it's possible, because countries like the Netherlands work like that. There are many companies where this model works, self-organizing companies, where they organize themselves, they determine their salaries themselves, they determine their job descriptions themselves, they decide in which teams they want to work. Ultimately, I think that would be a really interesting space to work. But for now, to answer your question, sorry, long answer, yes. Yeah. Plan your incentives and say, focus on all of these things as a stepping stone to get there.
Yeah, of course. And that's what I was going to ask. I mean, surely, what you're describing is the ideal state.
Yes.
But we have been living in the current system for such a long time, and people have been drinking the Kool-Aid for such a long time that to create that shift, you're going to need to start with measurement. And what you measure is what would get done. And then eventually you get people into a flow. But that ties into my last question, which is really about whether it's time for us to think about a change in that social contract that business has with society, so that we can get to this net positive, this understanding of, as an organization, you have a purpose in the collective or in the ecosystem. And that purpose of yours should translate into prosperity across the various stakeholders. But you need to understand that is the contract that you've got with society. Do you think that does that make sense to you?
I really so agree with what you say. You get full marks for that one.
Thank you. That's wonderful. It's a beautiful way for me to end of the week. And it's we're recording this on a Friday. So that renegotiation with society, but then Cathie, society would then also need to come on board, because I think, when we're talking about, when I say
correct,
drinking the Kool-Aid, it's not just people in organizations or just the shareholders or just the directors or just the executives. It's us as a broader society. You are starting to see more and more people waking up, and that pushback is coming. But the average person in the street should be demanding for that social contract to be renegotiated.
But remember, there's a flip side to the coin as well. I totally agree with what you say. We should be demanding more because life is precious and we need to step up as humanity. And we are. I mean, human evolution, you can read any book and you can see how things are happening. And as I said earlier, it seems like we're moving into a new era, which is very exciting for me. And the levels of empathy are greater. We understand what inherent human rights mean. We understand what ecological degradation and ecological respect means. I mean, you now have crimes against nature recognized in some countries. I mean, that's exciting, right?
Yeah.
But on the other side, you also have to play your part. There's nothing so disheartening when you see people who are acting unacceptable. Just don't do it. You know, just be a proper person.
Yeah.
So you cannot expect that society must carry you if you are not pulling your weight. It goes both sides. And also when I spoke about, you know, my ideal setup about self-organizing and so on, it's much harder because you've got to be self-disciplined. You've got to have a lot of respect for yourself, for the position. It's heavy, you know. You can't just say, oh, you know, I don't feel like it. I think I'm going to do a little bit of Netflix today. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So it's a task, and, you know, it's a collective step up that we need to do.
Yeah, and that's quite a challenge to all of us, and probably the best way for us to end off the conversation is the challenge to the individuals, you know, as us as individuals within the collective. And I think over time we've moved to such an individualistic way of life, you know, so individualism has become core to our cultures, to our business cultures. That we often don't see, just as much as we have a conversation earlier on of the organizations having an impact and being impacted upon. As individuals, we often don't see that. We tend to live very obliviously or just exist without understanding our purpose and making sure that we leave a positive handprint on the collective, as opposed to a negative footprint on the collective. Cathie, thank you so much once again for being so generous in sharing your insights with us. I do hope that for those who have watched the video, that at least one or two of the things that we talked about today, that it's something that you'll take back to go and reflect on, that you will take back to your organizations and have conversations and start the conversation in your organization if that conversation is not already on the table. If it is on the table, maybe help accelerate the conversation, because at the end of the day, we are living with finite time on our hands, Cathie. If we don't all wake up, or enough of us wake up and start to shift the needle, we are collectively going to be in trouble. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you for visiting the website. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to subscribe to the website. If you do, you'll get a notification every time I post something new on the website. You're also welcome to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, so that you can always come back and watch the videos whenever we've added something new. Cathie, once again, thank you. I really, really appreciate the time with you, and I certainly have learned quite a bit in the process.